Okay, that looks like it's working. Can I get a confirmation on someone online that they can hear? Anyone?
Just back up on your track.
Hi, David. Yes, I can now. Thank you. Back.
Oh, thanks.
Back to Hororata, yeah, so it's been wet and a lot of rain fell and continued into Hororata Township. Here's a photo from up in the catchment of Hororata, and this just shows what we're trying to deal with. It's just basically paddocks completely saturated and flowing with water straight down into the township. This wasn't just happening in Hororata, this was happening right across the district. Here's a photo of Anna just above Waddington, just above Sheffield, and we've got again significant overland flows all converging, heading down plains into our townships. Sheffield's probably worth noting because there's no stormwater network as such in Sheffield, so it was all flowing through the roads, streets, and across into the river eventually. Kirwee was a real surprise, this event, with some significant overland flow paths hitting residential properties in Kirwee, and especially the newer subdivisions out to the west of the township. It's a little bit unclear as to exactly how this has happened or what they are, but it's pretty clear that they are paddocks literally, and then the water's just started flowing through, and these are photos showing the water where it's coming from. It's just paddocks converging and flowing towards the township. And again, the water was still prevalent a couple of days later when the sun was out. There was a lot of water just sitting around, and that just adds into the couple of events that were causing this. So we had one event that caused the water, it just hung around and stayed for the month. So event number 2 was forecast to be really bad. It was a nor'west rainfall event, and it was forecast to come over the Alps and drop a lot of rain on us. We were quite lucky that it didn't eventuate the way it was. We had a lot of wind damage and stuff, but we didn't have the rain that was forecast. But what did happen is, following the nor'west, it turned southwest, and we got about 30-40 mils of rain following that. So it didn't necessarily cause us problems as such, but we did notice that areas such as Taitapu, Otahuna, the basin areas, they started to fill up with water. And this photo just shows a piece of stormwater infrastructure in Lincoln, and the basins all filled up and worked as they were intended. But a couple of days later, we got yet another heavy rain warning, and this was towards the end of the month. And yeah, as I keep saying, by this stage, everything was really, really wet. So it wasn't taking much rain at all before water started flowing and flowing over land. This rainfall event really hit the eastern part of the district quite hard, and especially our towns like this photo is Springston, Lincoln, Prebleton, Taitapu were all very wet during this rainfall event. We got about another 60 mils of rain recorded at Taitapu. Again, that puts it within about a 1 in 5 year event of probability of that happening. The areas that caused us trouble was the Hallswell catchment, Taitapu, Otahuna, and the farmland above Lincoln and Prebleton. The Hallswell River rose very quickly. There was a lot of rainfall in Christchurch City that ended up contributing into the Hallswell River, but we had contractors ready to go quickly and had the emergency pump set up in Taitapu Township. This photo is the Barton Fields and Greenstead development of Lincoln, and this was one area that suffered quite a few problems during the rainfall event. There was significant overland flows from the farmland above that entered into the newer developments and caused a few problems with some of the overland flow paths and stuff being blocked. And here's a photo of the street within the development. It's probably worth noting that stormwater systems are designed so when the primary system can't cope with the water anymore, the secondary system and the flow path system will start to work. And this is what we're seeing here is that, you know, there's water in the street, but it's well away from the houses. The houses all have plenty of freeboard and they're not at risk of having water go into them. So with this development, we're currently just working with the developer and just looking at a few options and just checking things have worked the way they should have and optimising where there is changes to be made. And I'm just going to close on this photo because I think this is a great one just to show the trouble we had this month, and it's just pretty much there's water sitting everywhere, overland flows everywhere, and when you get more rain on top of it, it's just starting to flow and into our townships. So we are still in the process of assessing and cleaning up everything. It's been an incredibly busy month, July was. And we're also trying to have a look and see with our capital works programs or annual works programs for the year starting up, just where we can make sure we can include works in those projects and stuff. And also just want to add to what Murray said earlier, and thanks to all our contractors and staff and everybody who's worked really hard this month. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Just in terms of our Five Waters report, I'll just rattle through it real quick and then we have questions at the end, if that's okay. So just in terms of recommendation, the Water Services Bill was lodged on the 21st of July. There might be a slight type issue there. In terms of our upgrade program, the Springfield or Sheffield to Springfield pipeline is in and should be operational end of this month, and the treated water reservoir towards the end of September. So that's progressing really well. The One Water strategy, the update on that is that our next meeting will be the 29th of August. So that's been arranged. And the last update would be the chlorine exemptions with Rakaya Hut. So we're meeting with Tamata Arawai this Friday just to get that progress. So that's the updates from the report you see in front of you. So happy to take questions on anything in the report and also the flood presentation.
Thank you for that. And as you both said, thanks to everyone in our community, as well as the contractors and, you know, paid people that have just got along to help their neighbours and support people through what was a really wet month. One of the things that we're doing as a council is our One Water strategy, and thinking about you know, our focus on water as a connected system right across our catchment. So just, Murray, I guess I'm interested from your perspective how you see a future direction around you know, that type of program of works actually being able to change or address or does it not some of the things that we're experiencing here.
Yeah, I suppose I'm just reflecting on our the original bus tour from the Alps down to the sea to Te Waihora, and flooding was one of the matters that we discussed on that journey. It was definitely one of the focal points. So I think that strategy will provide some input and vision into where we want to be as a council. Then under that strategy, we have a number of blueprints. The potable water is the most progressed, but we are developing a stormwater one as well, which will pull together all these issues and look at it as a district-wide approach of how we can resolve these issues or work towards resolving these issues. Because it's a big job and it won't be happening over the first few years, but it's something we can work towards as a long-term plan.
In thinking about the notification of these types of things for the future growth areas and for people that are buying properties and limb notes and things, what's the process between what we know now is, you know, the immediate situation, but actually making sure this information is captured to inform future decision making?
So I suppose that with each flood event we go through, if we do notice that properties are flooded, that information is added to the notes at that point.
Yeah, just Daniel, you were talking about Barton Fields and you're talking about some of the farmland around it, water coming across from those. I got a call from one of those farmers there who's on Tankridge Road, the boundary of Tankridge Road, and he's been concerned for some time that when Tankridge Road was upgraded for the subdivision, that the drainage on the side of the road past his farm had been blocked with debris from the roadworks and has not yet been cleared out. I was just wondering if that might have had something to do with the amount of water that was floating around. Unfortunately, this landowner has had a fierce debate with the contractors just this morning who are putting it right. And I think things are fairly feisty down there at the moment. So I wonder if you knew anything about the issue.
Yeah, there's quite a few factors that have affected that Barton Fields area. I guess it's probably too early to say exactly what is causing things, what isn't. But we have put some comms out for the community in that area, and I'm sort of aware of some conversations with landowners and that. So yeah, we'll work through on that.
Yeah, I'll catch up with you offline.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Thanks for the report. And I know it must have been a trying time. But I've still got a concern about the at the Hawkins, because the Hawkins Road, because I went there in the morning and the drain was basically empty. I went back 2 hours later, it was just starting to overflow into the road, and there wasn't a pump there. So I rang council, there was a pump put there. About half an hour later, Cord rang me to say that there was. But I believe those couple of hours were really crucial. And I think that a lot of the flooding would have been averted if we'd got rid of some of that water early. It's only a personal opinion, but that's what how the community feel about it as well. So in the future, I wonder if there is a way we can actually have it there a wee bit earlier, anticipating it.
Cool. No, thank you, Bob. And we can take that into account when we review the event and what we've done well and what we can improve on, for sure.
Thanks, Bob. Mark?
Thank you. Great report, and I too echo the comments about contractors being out in these events. A lot of the community complaining about flooding, who are sitting in their nice warm homes, fiercely tapping away at their keyboards. They're not out there actually working in it. And I think we really do need to acknowledge the contractors and staff who were out there. This overland flow from farmland onto new subdivisions, for me it raises a question about the question of how do we manage that interface as we grow. With the plethora of plan changes that are proceeding through council's processing, this would appear to be potentially an ongoing problem as the boundaries of townships shift, and what was traditional flow across paddocks and didn't really bother anybody terribly much. Suddenly there's a paddock full of houses that's going to affect a whole lot of people. How do we best manage that? It's not a question for you to answer today, but it's really to give some thought to us how, with our environmental services team, we work on managing this, I guess, is the mitigating in the resource lingo, these effects, so that we don't, have a new subdivision built that immediately rears up a farm full of water that wouldn't normally have bothered anybody.
I'll just run quickly. Typically speaking, the subdivisions take into account overland flow paths and depressions above them, and the road network is designed to convey that flow through. So in cases where it hasn't worked quite as we would have hoped it would, that's what we're going to look into and see why that case is.
As I understand, it was also an issue at QE with some of the newer subdivisions there. Suddenly had water flows that weren't necessarily expected, but when you looked at sort of topo maps and things, you kind of said, well, maybe it was, maybe it should have been, maybe there should have been some more thought into consenting. One other question I have is from your report, when you're talking about temporary chlorination and things, is with these rain events, typically we've been going to boil water notices and restricted supply to our upland water supplies. With chlorination, and I think most of them probably are chlorinated, actually help prevent those boil water notices, or is there a different solution needed, perhaps more storage ahead of the event, to stop these issues?
Yeah, so in those rural supplies, they are chlorinated. So the Melbourne Hills, Horata, Arthur's Pass, Castle Hall, they're all actually permanently chlorinated anyway. So the chlorination was added on those schemes to deal with contamination that generates from the reticulated network itself. And so the chlorine doesn't solve that issue we've been having recently. So the issue we've had is high turbidity levels, so we can't guarantee the water's safe to drink. And that's why we have a precautionary boil water notice. So no contamination is actually being detected in the network, but we can't guarantee that it's going to be safe. So the way to solve that, one option would be to increase storage at the front end so we can buffer through those storm events. Alternatively, like we are for Springfield, would be to put a high level of treatment, membrane filtration, or the like. For Horata, we are, as staff, looking at, as part of the blueprint process, combining the Horata and Hartley's Road schemes and potentially having one treatment plant, which is a higher level of treatment, feeding both of those schemes. So there's a number of ways we can work towards solving that. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Deborah.
Thanks for your report. I noticed on page 22, you actually make comment about these being a 1 in 5 year event. All the rain events themselves are not considered to be major or are less than 1 in 5 year events, but the cumulative effect of them has had the situation where our soils have become saturated. If this is going to be a regular occurrence in climate change, can I ask what capacity are we designing our stormwater retention basins to? Is it 1 in 100 or 1 in 200 year events? And can you please explain the difference and impact between what we're seeing now and what would be envisaged in a 1 in 200 flood event?
Yes, I'm not sure I can answer all those questions, but I have a crack at it and Dan can correct me where I'm wrong. But our primary stormwater networks, that's our sumps and pipes, soak holes, etc., are designed for a 1 in 10 year event. So that's the that's the return period we look at. The stormwater basins, like for example in Rolleston, are designed to attenuate the 50-year event and fully detain that. So in a 50-year event, we don't want stormwater running from one subdivision to another. Some of the issues we talked about, maybe in Kuwi, potentially have been designed for different design standards. If you look back to the older parts of our townships, they may have been designed for a 2-year event or even less than that. So I think as we move forward, it's lifting up our older systems to meet those newer requirements.
Okay, great.
First of all, thank you to your team. It was very well done. I think especially Cord out in the weather, we saw them out there battling away, and it's obviously a thankless task, but so thanks for that. I think one of the things I wanted to refer to was some of the things that came up was really, particularly it's probably eroding and stormwater team is culvert identification. There was a lot of culverts that were brought to my attention that either weren't marked or were closed off at the end, and I brought a couple to Dan's attention. So I was just wondering if there is an asset management plan around our culverts and identification. Normally on the state highways, they've got green marker pegs with a reference number. That would enable the contractors to actually methodically clean them. Also some challenges around particularly the hell coil type ones, the corrugated iron ones, about the return period, of concern about how long they're going to last for. So that was one point. The second thing was around, and Bob was sort of talking about as well, was very good response in Taitapu with the temporary pump, which really kept it dry when it was really wet. But when we first considered that, we did consider a static sump with an electric motor and electric, on a float switch. At the time, we thought it was probably too dear and we could probably get by with pumps, but those 1 in 10 year floods seem to be 1 3-year floods, and or every year the pump seems to be there. So I guess that cost benefit analysis of when we switch from having the guys there for 24 hours and having a proper solution that's just built in and ready to go. And if DCs are required while there is development going on, that would be. The third thing that came up was what looked like a good size pipe in the middle of January was not a good size pipe in the middle of July. I wonder if some of particularly the sizing of pipes was under spec in particular areas. I can speak to you, Murray, about those earlier on, but I think that was, and no, that's it. Thank you very much. Oh, the last thing, sorry, Mark's, the rural urban interface has been a particular concern to the L2 committee for quite a long time. And I think we're not pointing the finger at you guys. I think the blame really lies with ECAN, particularly around desktop assessments of flood capacity and water flows. And certainly, we've taken photos which probably, although ECAN have historical data, don't seem to refer to when they issue consent. So I guess somehow or other, send that message back to ECAN that when they approve these consents, they do really take some local knowledge into account. Thank you.
Cool. So Murray, Washington, I might get you to talk to the roading one, but as you gather your thoughts, Taitapu flood pumping and permit solution, it's something we can definitely look at again. And now digitized rate, that sort of funding mechanism is probably a lot easier than when we first looked at it when it was just the Taitapu community looking at funding that. Pipe sizes for outland drainage. I suppose land drainage network typically has been sized to convey groundwater and not for flood flows. But as we look forward, then perhaps we do want to have that dual function and upgrade some of our culverts to allow that flood flow to pass more readily as well. Sorry, and Dan.
And then just on the your ECAN question and the rural interface and that, so these aerial photos and that was a joint helicopter inspection with ECAN staff. We were showing them when we had issues, and so we're doing a lot of work with ECAN staff so they understand what happened.
Yeah, I'll check up about the culvert identification ground and just check with that. Just a couple of things. One, although you note they're 1 in 5 year events from the petition, checking the river levels, river flows, the Horrat was well over 1 in 10 year event at one point, and the Hallsville was probably about a 1 in 13 year event at its peak, and as it had 2 distinct peaks about 3 or 4 days apart. So I'm not sure how you actually extrapolate a 1 in 5, a storm event when they're so close together they become basically compounded in that respect. The other issue, and Grant, you talked about the rural urban interface, and as you're aware, council, particularly in the urban areas, has to deal with, and the Springfield to Sheffield to Horrat, overland flow is a big issue. We're dealing with water that's coming off a farmland, change land use patterns, and that's a continual discussion, particularly with Sam's leading with ECAN about the responsibilities around overland flows, river management, and the like.
Sorry, Shane, just to refer to that. Well, one of the great things that came out of it was that our detention stormwater ponds worked really good. And I think one of the key things was that ponds actually worked better when this development was fully developed. And if using Verdeco as an example, Deborah and I went there numerous times when it was being developed. It had a very high, low performance level, but once it was actually fully developed, it actually seems to be right. And I've got to eat some humble pie. The levels do seem to be right on that scheme. So it is working as designed. So thank you.
Thanks, Grant. Thank you.
Kia ora, tēnā rā tātou, to the House, our guests, staff, fellow councillors, kura matua Sam, e kaipakahaere David, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Thanks very much, guys, for the report. Myself as well would like to congratulate yourselves and contractors, civil defence and volunteers that participated in helping our residents out during this flood event, or the compounding 3 events over the past month and a wee bit. One of the concerns that was raised, and you've addressed it, Murray, from some of the residents that I've spoken to at Rakaia Huts, was around the progress with exemptions and chlorination, and any updates that you get from that. The Residents Association or Community Committee would really appreciate the response from that. Another residents from Salmon Lake Road also expressed concern over the grading conditions, the deepening cut that's allowing for basically a pool to occur, and where the responsibility lies in a culvert in between that road and some furthering development. So I think some working behind that to give them some comfort, and also some understanding of whose responsibility it is for a drain that runs down the side of the culvert, and then a heap of willows that are blocking it getting out to Waihora. Just to the report and the chlorination, I wanted to thank the presenters from last week, and obviously the attention's high. That was Heather Morton and her friends for presenting last week and expressing their concerns around chlorination. What I wanted to suggest perhaps then, but the tensions were quite high, so perhaps now is there was a gap between the knowledge of what they knew where our current system was in terms of UV and some of the treatment that currently we are doing, and perhaps there's an opportunity for an education piece for that particular group, and perhaps other members of our community to be a part of that, or to learn a wee bit more so that they understand the effort and the decisions that have been made in the past to get us ahead. And from what I've seen and what I understand, the district itself is well ahead and have been planning and mitigating for the risk that this was an eventuality. So that was one of the things I had. Just regard to the flowing, Dan, you mentioned that the secondary flow system with the new developments tends to be the road, but the concerns that are coming back through from the communities of the older the older developments that are tending to suffer, and that's coming through from farmland and up in the Dunsandel area and that sort of area, the concern, and that was right up to the doorstep and just about through. So, and I know you're in communication, and so I do thank you for all the effort that you guys are putting into it. And just in relation to the report again on the water services submission, just need clarification. Council in the past, well, I can't see where it's, and apologies if it's in there, in the past adopted the position that the Selwyn District Council wouldn't transfer any asset to a water entity without consultation with our public. And I don't see that in here, but that was an adopted position that we took around this room. So whether, and perhaps this isn't the place for it, Sam, but we really need clarification on it moving forward, because when does that happen is my question. Thank you.
The last piece, Shane, was the decision of this council before anything was made mandatory. So when there was a conversation that needed to be had about the future direction, that we wouldn't make that decision independently of going out. It was since taken away from us when the government made these reforms an all-in approach. And so the view of the submission is the views of the community that we feel like around the council have been able to be put forward through that submission, and Murray and I are working on a time to present that to the select committee in person.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. So a lot of things here. I think we'll talk to you some about afterwards, particularly around Lake Road and some of the culverts. Just about the chlorine info piece, I think we do very well saying what we're going to do, but I think you're right. We should sort of outline what we have done, which is a huge amount of work and upgrades of our water treatment plants and systems. So it's a good point. We'll cover that.
Before you guys start, it's just that photos up there, and it just, I think it's a reminder to all of us is like, whose problem is this? And it can be very easy to point fingers at someone else and think that it's their responsibility. Maybe it's them upstream. Maybe it's too small of a pipe downstream that's causing it to back up. Maybe it's our council for the things that we've said we'll do, or things that are perceived to have been done. Maybe it's ECAN because you don't see them as a part of this conversation. There's a whole lot of finger pointing tends to go on in these exercises. And I think in some ways we are, we end up in a space where, because we care about our community and have tried to do some things and be proactive, the finger gets pointed at us more often than the responsibility should. So I want to say thanks to our staff who have continued to support councillors' views that actually we care about our community and want to be proactive in this space. But I just want to highlight that the continued direction of travel around this has been asking ECAN again and again and again to step up and take on more responsibility for stormwater, river and flood events across Selwyn. We'll give them a pretty simple solution about how they might be able to fund it, and we will continue to push to make sure that happens going forward. Sophie?
Yeah, just want to support that, but also add there were some fantastic photos that came out of that aerial survey. This is, yeah, you can see the water kind of remembering where it used to go and stuff. But I guess the main point I wanted to make was the rain doesn't care where it lands. It's quite easy to go, oh, it's come up from the top of the catchment, the middle of the, actually quite often, as you guys will know, it lands everywhere. And it doesn't matter whether it's anywhere near an actual river or a drain or anything else, it's still got to go somewhere, and quite often that is literally where it goes. It will puddle where it finds easiest. Water doesn't care.
Thanks, Sophie. You happy to move the report then? Great. Seconder? Shane, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carries. Thank you. The next item is on tab 9, page 34 of today's agenda. It's a council submission on proposed amendments to the wetland provision to the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management and National Environmental Standards for Freshwater. George is Tim's here in place of George. And if there's any questions on this, just up. Tim, was there anything you wanted to say about the submission before we have any questions?
Certainly, the submission is circulated draft with the council start by email.
Microphone, turn those on like that here.
Yeah, I believe the draft submission was circulated to council as the tight timeframes didn't allow for this process to happen. I should also say that 4 staff who would have been sitting here instead of me are all down with sickness. So I'm afraid I'm the person, and I may not be able to answer all the technical questions, but I certainly can get them back to the relevant staff to bring back answers if required.
Great, thanks. And it's, I mean, retrospectively, this has been done, so it's sent and we're endorsing today, that action. So, Deb. Oh, so thank you. Moved by Malcolm. Is there a seconder? Mark, thanks. Deborah?
With regards to page 36, I appreciate that it was circulated to councillors for feedback with regards to the submission itself. I guess my query is around the options that are actually given, that we have a submission that to receive and retrospectively endorse the submission. And if we don't, then we will actually withdraw from feedback. For transparency, have we got a real danger of actually not being able to show our public that we are debating in open chamber many of these requirements that are needed by for endorsement from central government? I appreciate we've been given very short timeframes from central government to put submissions in, but I guess it still comes back to the creeping transparency issue, whether this is the correct process to continue having documents circulated and then having to retrospectively actually endorse them. And I'd just like comment with regards to process. Thank you.
Thanks, Deborah. Normally we would want this done ahead of time and not have to do it retrospectively. The timing on this has meant that it's been done this way. I don't think that every decision that this council makes needs to be put back out to the community time and again. We've often talked about consultation overload for our communities, and sometimes we're elected to ensure that we can put our best foot forward in a timely manner. So in this case, I agree with you. Ahead of time would be better, but that also doesn't mean that if we can stretch it out any longer, we would have done it differently. David?
Yeah, similar comments, and the big danger that we've got, Councillor Hassan, is the lack of available time from government to be able to respond to this. That is the problem, not our process.
Yes. All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. The next item is on tab 10, page 42. This is a council submission on a proposed national policy statement for Indigenous biodiversity. Moved Murray, seconded Bob. Any conversation here? Deborah?
Yes, I do. And I've made this comment with regards to looking at sorry, I haven't got it opened on my agenda because I'm just with regards to the 10-year implementation plan. I know it's got to coincide with district planning or regional planning processes, but I was really concerned about the 10-year timeframe given for this to actually be enacted. And I just wanted to highlight that. The other issue also that without knowing what the end result is for the Resource Management Act, we have a requirement for our esplanade strips and our esplanade reserves to be a measured distance away to actually accommodate biodiversity within the current legislation. And I just wonder, when we have more urban encroachment on natural biodiversity, whether we should have actually probably promoted on a case-by-case basis a further extension instead of sticking with the 20-metre esplanade reserve requirement and a 5-metre esplanade strip that is currently being implemented. So I did actually email a comment with regards to that back to the author, but just want to highlight those particular issues.
Thanks, Deborah. Don't think that answers it, Tim. Murray?
Yeah, just a quick comment, Sam. Obviously, it is retrospective, as you said, with the previous paper. But I did meet with Denise and Andy and George for consultation as well post that meeting. From my perspective, from the government's perspective, and thinking about the Southern Biodiversity Strategy, which is currently underway and will be referenced obviously to the NPSIB, It was really important from my perspective that we reflected where we were with the proposed district plan. Hence some of the comments there around listing of SNAs as voluntary, and that was where we landed there. So some quick commentary there. Thanks to all those 3 staff members for putting this together at very short notice. We hadn't actually really expected a second draft of this to come out and the ability to resubmit on it. So I wouldn't say it was thrown together quickly. That's unfair to those who did the work, but it certainly had a reduced time frame, and it wasn't the expectation we get a second chance to submit on it. So where we end up, I mean, we're one of many submissions, I'm sure. The crucial thing for councils going forward in the relationship that hopefully we will build under the Canterbury Biodiversity Strategy is how this is funded and how we fund it with central government and other bodies. So, look, I just got, again, to pay tribute to staff for putting this together. And I think it's a good reflection, as good a reflection as we could get in the time frame as to where Selwyn sat on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Murray. Tim?
Just the only comment I would make is on the implementation. There are, I think, over 600 potential SNAs in Selwyn District. We'll be required to map those, the whole district, in the next 5 years at a cost we estimate probably in around $3 million. So it's something to note in terms of future funding, and that is an issue that Murray's just alluded to.
Great, and that's an ongoing conversation we're having with LGNZ back to government about unfunded mandates and the extra work that we've been required to do in the funding of that work to meet national policy statement objectives. I also say thank you to George for the way he's worked with the Canterbury Mural Forum and also with LGNZ and their submissions were actually largely influenced by George and his input into those were appreciated. So just that Selwyn voice on the regional and national scale was important. So Tim, thanks for having staff that are able to input at that level. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thanks, Tim. The next item is our community services and facilities updates, tab 10 or page 56 of today's agenda. And Denise and team, welcome along.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I have asked Kirsten Dingwall-Okoye and Luke Soul to speak to councillors today as part of the Community Services and Facilities update on the topics of the Hapai Access Card and also this digital inclusion with a particular focus on the skinny jump modems. But firstly, I just want to speak briefly to councillors about the customer experience survey results that have just taken place. So we have recently undertaken the annual customer experience survey, and that we had 942 respondents to that survey. The bellwether door counters and the online booking system already tell us how much and how many. The purpose of this survey is to tell us how well we are delivering and also to help us to understand the impact on people's well-being of the services we deliver. The evidence base around the influences of well-being already exists. Having strong relationships, being physically active, being involved in some form of learning are all important influences of well-being. As well, the processes of giving and becoming more aware have been shown to specifically influence well-being. And these 5 behaviours, the research suggests, reduce the incidence of longer-term mental health issues. This survey informs the Community Services and Facilities operations planning for the year and the years ahead. And it helps us to understand the behaviours that impact most on well-being. So at this point, I'll just hand across to Luke. Do you want to go first just to talk around the digital inclusion?
Absolutely. Kia ora koutou, Luke Soul, Tuko Ingoa. I am the District Digital Futures Coordinator in the Arts, Culture and Lifelong Learning team. It's my pleasure to spend a couple of minutes with you today to talk about some digital initiatives. that we're doing in our spaces. Anyone who knows me knows that brevity probably isn't one of my strong points, but I'll do my best to go as quickly as possible. So I'm just going to quickly talk about digital equity and inclusion, just to frame context of what I'm talking about. So when we're talking about digital equity, we're talking about access and effective use of digital technologies across the entire age range, so as to participate in our society, democracy and economy. And digital inclusion refers to initiatives and actions that we undertake as we work towards digital equity. So if we're thinking about barriers to digital equity, and I'll just move through this really quickly, we talk about services to a building, to utilities. Well, at least 10% of people in Aotearoa are digitally excluded, including many in our community, and over 20% struggle to access necessary digital hardware and devices. So the groups that have the most to gain from digital equity initiatives, often the ones who face the most barriers, including people on low incomes, seniors, Māori, Pacific people, those with disabilities and new migrants. One thing that we've noticed is a lot of the work that we do is around assistance accessing government services. And that's something that we've worked through a lot, whether that's vaccine passes, but also accessing Real Me. It's a real challenge for migrant communities, especially. If we look at, just very quickly, look at our unique digital challenges here. As a rural person, I can attest to how difficult it is to get a functioning internet connection. A lot of people on 4G can't afford satellite or other options. So what we have been doing is offering a subsidized broadband offering. So I've worked with Skinny Jump, a Spark Foundation. So you can come into any of our facilities and you can pay, you basically receive a modem for free, and for $5 a month that will give you 30 gigabytes of data. No plans required. It's incredibly inclusive. They can cancel at any time and they can double their allowance at $5 a pop. So it's much more affordable than, I can definitely attest to. I was spending $120 for about 60 gigabytes in my rural area. So there's also has been an approach of sort of opting out. Well, digital isn't for me. And I think as we think about the way that people transact with council and just the growing prevalence of sort of digital by design, then that is no longer a viable option for our communities. So in terms of ACLL's approach, we've worked a lot on partnerships to deliver digital learning. And so that might be working with the Spark Foundation, but it's also working with others such as Creative Trust to bring in experiences into our spaces. We're using our ECV vehicle for the distribution of Skinny Jump. I was delighted recently to find out that some additional spaces, connection allocations have been freed up in the Arthur's Pass area. We have a limitation in that there are only a set amount of connection points. They're hotly contested, especially with the growth of lifestyle properties and demand on existing services. So straight away when we found out that those connections were available, we've loaded up the Edge Connector vehicle to take advantage of that. In our spaces, we've adopted an inclusive, judgment-free approach to accessing equipment. We have a plethora of devices at Te Ara Atia, for instance, and also in our smaller libraries as well. We've boosted the amount of digital devices that we have on hand. In terms of accessing those devices, we're less concerned about whether that person is a library member or whether they have historic fines. It's more about giving them access to it. We're also looking at adding tech basically to our circulation, to our catalogue. So in the near future, users will be able to take a tablet home, for example, for use with schoolwork or digital learning. The other thing that is sort of emerging in the libraries world is around, offering micro credentials, which is a way of acknowledging some as a small course or digital learning. It's actually giving them a certificate and digital recognition of learning, which can be added to their CV as well. So just very quickly, these are just some of the partnerships that we're currently partners that we're currently working with. So Digital Alliance Aotearoa do some amazing work, and so they help us with Skinny Jump. They also provide access to online training, and have helped us work with the likes of KiwiBank to provide digital training to older adults, especially around transacting online and being safe. I'm very proud to be part of the Waitaha Regional Digital Equity Working Group. Absolutely rolls off the tongue, that one. And so that's a group of council members and also Spark, various private businesses all coming together to pool resources in the space. And Selwyn is beginning to get to be noticed and have a very good reputation in that space. So just finally, this is Norman Duxfield, who is a local. He was one of the first people to sign up for the scheme when we started offering it about 1.5 years ago. I caught up with him in the last couple of weeks, and I think if we had a position going in our libraries team, he would be he would jump all over it. Just the confidence that that they both have, to go from having never really used digital equipment before to, he sent me a spreadsheet of his expenses and how much this initiative has actually saved him. The other thing I mentioned to Denise just before, someone came in recently who had recently been released from prison and wanted to sign up and, observe that, things had changed so much and they had no idea basically how to reintegrate and how to access technology. So yeah, it's a really special initiative. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, ko Kirsten Dingwanakoya, toko ingoa. Pleased to be here today to talk about the Hapai Access Card. So the Hapai Foundation, who administrates the Hapai Access Card, contacted us at Selwyn District Council alongside of James Richmond and Ginny Barton to talk about the fact that the Kiwi Able Access Card, which was a historic card that STC had participated in at the Aquatic Centre and in some of our recreation activities, was being disestablished. And the Hapai Access Card was seen as its worthy successor. The historic of the Kiwi Able Access is that it was administrated by Christchurch City Council, but it was accepted in councils and facilities across Canterbury region. So the next slide sort of talks about why we're doing it. Doesn't. Okay. All right. So basically it was just based on our accessibility charter. The Hapai Access Card is a social model of disability. So where the Kiwi Able was just a discount card, the social model of disability talks about removing barriers for people to participate with equity in all aspects of living life. And so we've got 10 facilities in Selwyn District Council that accept the card. So obviously we've gone from the community spaces where we had recreation as well as the Aquatic Centre to being able to provide it in our libraries and also at HQ. We've got those up there. Yep. And so the next slide shows how a user will access the information once we've onboarded. So there is someone might look at where to use the card, they'll press that, and then they'll see a region. I've put up there Rolleston, and then it will show all the places where they can use the card in Rolleston. There is, on that same site, there is a video down further, which we won't play right now because it's 18 minutes long, but it will also show how the business will help the end user. So the Hapai Access card, the example there is a link. We don't need to go there, but it will be the Darfield Library and Service Centre. And so it shows how the staff will assist someone with one of the 9 icons of disability. And then, as you can see alongside of that, it's just a little example where I've got some paper copies, just of how staff can assist people with specific disabilities. So as you can see, the next slide will be, we onboarded by responding for each unique facility on how we can cater for each disability. And so it's the what and the how. Our staff, we have a public response for the person with accessibility needs, and we have a staff response that's under the reception counter or on their FAQ online that they can refer to. And so that's on the website, but it's also in hard copy at each facility. Further to Selwyn District Council onboarding, at least at the time that I did this PowerPoint, 28 businesses have indicated or onboarded with the Hapai Access card. So we've got places far out as the Fat Beagle in Darfield, and all the urban eateries, and it includes clothing stores, eateries, and everything like that. The other aspect of the Hapai Access card is that it trains our staff in how to respond to people with specific disabilities. So there's been some work with the enabling group under People Capability and Culture and Information Services to develop our Compass training. So potentially at the time we're going to have up to 100 staff having done the training on the intranet and been signed off as having done that. And we did an in-person event to launch the card last month, where 65 people turned up and a lot of those were disability organisations or people with accessibility needs. And we've obviously done our media launch and articles around that.
So those are the 2 updates we were wanting to give you. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Denise. Luke and Kirsten, it's really cool to see what's going on. Thanks for the, I guess, the caring way in which we're thinking about the breadth of people that live within our community and making sure that people can have access to, the range of things that for some we just take for granted, and for others it's a real struggle. So I really appreciate that. Questions around the table. We've got Murray, Mark, and Shane.
So just clarification: is this the whole report questions or just this aspect of it, Denise?
It's a whole report.
Whole report, thank you. Denise, I just forwarded that email on the conversation we had earlier, so I'll just ask this public because I said I'd ask this in the meeting. And actually, it goes to accessibility, really, doesn't it? It's quite timely. So had an inquiry from a ratepayer about the temporary reduction now, of the libraries at both doors. That's right. Sorry, I'm having a terrible Darfield and Leicester. I beg your pardon. Just been writing Dunsandel down on my piece of paper. And whether they are now in fact permanent. And I think it's probably just timely for you to be able to give an update, Denise, and perhaps feedback directly to that inquiry too via the email reply. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll invite Nikki Moen to talk a little bit more about it. But as far as what we have done is that we had a time limited reduction in the hours that reflected the needs associated with COVID and also it was undertaken at a time when there was the least usage being made of the facilities, and we have now continued that. But as with our hours, as with our days, as with our fees and charges, these are reviewed annually, and also part of I guess our access is also the Edge Connector vehicle, which is also available at different times and different days in different locations, which is also another factor that comes into account. So is there anything that you would want to add to that, Nikki?
No, Teresa, it is correct. The business continues to shift across between different service points, and we're recording that every week so that we're aware of patterns of usage, and we're recording customer feedback, which comes from multiple channels as well, and ready to respond to that. So at an earlier meeting, we said that we would continue to review these hours. So that's what we'll do. Yes.
Just as a follow-up to that, I guess the inference of the email from the Great Power was that this was touted initially as temporary. If it's changing circumstances and accept that, it's about communicating that back to the wider community. I'm sure that'll be done, but are you able to communicate directly back to that inquiry too?
Certainly, and part of it was, I guess, tabling that with council in the first instance. So yes.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. My first question is really directed to James Richmond. You can answer it, James, when we come talking about the Garfield pool, which was the patronage of the Sheffield pool over the summer. If you've got those figures, the next report is more in the context of that report, so it's giving you a heads up. I presume it was a typo in the survey analysis that talks about sauna and gum at the Selwyn Aquatic Centre. I presume it's meant to be sauna and gym. Gum is probably not something we want in our swimming pools. And the Canterbury, I see we listed under the school visits, the University of Canterbury. That's an awfully big school. I just wondered whether there was a particular group of students that had come out on a Saturday morning to see a particular thing that you might care to sort of give us some more information about. I love that we counted them as a school visit, but it's not what I would have thought was a school visit.
I don't know. Nikki, can you talk to that about the University of Canterbury visiting a library facility?
No. Luke?
Throw it up.
The 5.3 lists it as a visit from the University of Canterbury students on the Saturday, May 7th.
Sorry, Nikki.
I understand now. We hosted Lincoln University Library and Learning Team one morning at Te Ara Aotea so that we could begin a closer working relationship with the university. That might have been what it was. Thank you.
It's Lincoln rather than Canterbury. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, all of you, for your report and your lovely pronunciation of the reo. Lovely. On the digital equity piece, fantastic. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And the skinny jump, also a wonderful initiative. Is that a subsidised, government subsidised, or the inequity? I mean, the company subsidised that you talked about?
It's subsidised by the Spark Foundation.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And in terms of connectivity, are there any areas that it hasn't worked within our district at all? Have you?
Yes. So as I alluded to before, so our 4G network has some restrictions. So many areas are at capacity, and that largely is the result of additional pressure that's been put on that infrastructure by the likes of lifestyle blocks and additional density.
Yes.
So there is some complication in terms of how those connections are allocated. But when connections are allocated, and a huge amount of our district does have available connection points for Skinny Jump, there are still some areas where it isn't available.
Right. And those,
Yeah, but as those connections become available, we can even get in touch with people, based on a wait list.
Awesome, mate. Thank you. So the areas that are black spots at the moment, the Spark are aware of those areas.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's great.
Sure.
Thank you. Kia ora, bro. The halfway card, what does WC stand for? I was racking my brain. I couldn't
It's
quite read it.
toilets.
Oh, I thought it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not about having the toilets, it's about
Yes.
immediate access.
I thought.
need.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. And just Denise, the overall report. There's a lot of data in here, but the overall performance of the facilities are very satisfied.
Yes, and I think the report mentions that for the first time in this financial year, the community facilities, community centres and halls actually were on a par with the revenue generation and their level of activity this time last year, which so that's very pleasing for us.
Yeah, thank you. Great indicator. Thanks very much, Steve. Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. All the events that you guys run are fantastic, and I guess we've got the two highlighted examples here. But if anybody hasn't read the entire report, there's so much else that's going on as well. Like you guys are, this team is probably the most public-facing one that people will encounter. Like we tend to take things like our roads and street lighting and whatever for granted, but you go into one of the community facilities and there is always something going on. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for that. Oh, and it was pretty awesome. I went to an Aku Ototahi event the other day, and they were on the slideshow. There was Luke's smiling face on the Waitahi Digital Equity. So very much appreciated work there too. Cheers.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the report. Do we have a mover and seconder? I don't think we did. We just demonstrated Mark and Sophie. Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you, Kirsten, Luke, Denise. The next item on the agenda is item 12, page 89. It's Starfield Pool Funding Proposal. Sandrine and James are here.
Kia ora, everyone. Thank you for considering this report. So as per the purpose outlined in the report, this report seeks to provide council with an update on the project and the costs associated with Starfield Pool. I guess on the surface of it, what we're asking for is quite easy to understand. It seeks approval to increase the base build price of the budget of the project, and then it further seeks an increase to add some value to that project, things like water play and hydro slides. That said, nothing's ever that simple, and I guess in behind that there's a few things that are really up for council to consider. As you've seen in the report, there's reference made to Sheffield Pool and kind of what's happening there. Just answering your question before, Mark, in terms of numbers of people through that facility. Last year there was 1,500 public visits to that facility. Just to put that in perspective, over the same period of time, Darfield facility would see that sort of number a fortnight, and Selwyn Aquatic Centre would see that number, almost that number a day. So that's kind of just to give you some perspective on that number. So 1,500 per season. That facility is coming near to the end of its asset life. It was a memorial pool built just after the Second War. And there are some issues that we're getting looked at the moment around that building. So Pal Fenwick have been engaged to look at the structure around that facility. It got pretty hammered in the last couple of rain events at Sheffield, and you can see the underside of the road and a few other interesting things going on out there at the moment. That is likely to be very costly to repair. So I'm just going to signal that now, but we'll have some more detail when that comes through. Additionally, it considers the ongoing growth in Selwyn Central, and I suppose that this is another tricky thing to try and figure out where we're going without having the strategies in place. But I think, as referenced in that report, Mark Riker's Places and Spaces plan has outlined the fact that there's additional growth. We need to relook at the aquatics facilities plan and figure out where we're going with some of that stuff. But ongoing population growth in the central area as well does lead us to sort of need to consider what's going to happen in Lincoln, what's going to happen to the Selwyn Aquatic Centre at the moment, and how much pressure is going on that. to see some of those numbers in there around the increases in learn to swim and visitation are quite startling. And it just, COVID hasn't really stopped any of that. COVID has paused some stuff around casual visits. But those, you know, the numbers of over 300,000 visits a year to that facility are high. And that's a step back from the 420,000 we had pre-COVID. So there's a large number of people coming through those pools. Back to Darfield though, you know, what we're really looking to do here is make sure we don't do half a job. We want to make sure that we make the facility as best we possibly can for the next 10 years of the life of the asset, and absolutely get the best case scenario and come back to inform council about how the programming's going, how the ongoing casual patronage is going, and really give it the best shot we possibly can. The funding implications have been outlined in the report, and Sandrine's next to me to talk to I guess if there's any questions around the escalations that we are seeing in the construction market at the moment. They're significant. I think a couple of years ago when this budget was put together, we were pretty confident that there was going to be plenty. That's definitely not the case now. So happy to take questions, and if Sandrine wants to add anything, happy to pass to you.
Yeah, I suppose. Hi, kia ora, everyone. I'm Sandrine, for those people who don't know me. Yeah, I think cost escalations is a real risk to all our projects. So it's something just to keep in the back of our minds. Even now, you know, we won't tender this work until probably early next year, so January or February. So there is still a risk that costs may escalate over and above what we're saying here. We do have contingency and we have some allowance for escalation, but we really don't know where the market's sitting. So I think we could still be in a position that value engineering may need to occur at a later stage, or more money is required for these projects.
Thank you for the report. I think many of you are probably familiar with the facility. At the moment, it doesn't really feel like it's a space to be proud of as a facility and so on that we provide for our community. But it's served the community for a really long time, and as you've highlighted, built a long time ago and managed under by volunteers for a very long time, as lots of our facilities have been. I think did a good job at project by project trying to add something more for the community. But the direction we've taken over the last 10 years, and particularly in the last 6, is to try and say, actually, how do we provide the best thing we can for our community going forward? And so I appreciate the thinking that's come back to this group, and it's not just about patch it up again, but actually try and do something that creates a space that's good. Bob and Jenny and I met met on site with the high school and primary school with James and Sandrine as well, just to talk through their needs going forward and to get some reflections back from them. So yeah, I support us doing this work, and I think some of it is related to getting the pool open this year, which, you know, even that, you know, we'll wreck ourselves to the last minute to try and get something ready for next year. And so we've got to do that work, and while we're on site, I think we should do what's put in front of us. But there'll be a range of views down the road, so I'm happy to hear those. And Bob, just because you've done some of the on-site stuff and local, do you want to jump in first?
Yes. This vote is extremely disappointing, not disappointing, but awkward for me, because as I've said, James, I've always thought that we should be putting money aside to bring a pool into Darfield earlier. And at that meeting we had the other day, it was a real eye-opener to me that Wollaston lives so much around population, and it was said that, well, the chance of Darfield being done in a reasonable time isn't going to happen because Lincoln and them will probably have a bigger population, so they would probably come in first. So that made me think, well, I really wouldn't be doing my community any favours to say, no, I don't want this, because I think they should have a decent facility. And, you know, I'd carry on and I'd do all the work that you've had here now, which is a total change of mind, only because you can only beat your head against a wall so long before it hurts. So I feel that, but you've always got to remember that a lot of our community travel 80 kilometres to go for a swim, and they do that for approximately 36 weeks of the year. So it's still not looking great for Melbourne, and probably it's quite disappointing that Selwyn which is a whole heap of communities, still seems to work. And I know they have to towards the main population. And I feel that a lot of people in our community are missing out, and they're missing out on swimming because they can't afford the time and they can't afford the 80 kilometres to go for a swim with their kids. So it's quite disappointing. But I would vote for what you're putting there.
Thank you. Can I just say, like, I guess I totally understand those dilemmas, and I'm doing this with, I guess, rates in mind, and we can't build a indoor aquatic facility and service it in every town. So, yeah, but I totally understand the view that you're taking.
Thanks, Mark.
We'll support the budgetary provisions that cost escalation, that's a reality. I wonder how we're going to handle this list of additional items, Sam, because some of them are definitely nice ifs. I don't support the hydro slide. I probably support the rest. And so it's difficult in the context of this report and the lack of workshopping and debating how we're going to handle this, because I don't want to vote against the other proposed improvements, but I definitely don't support the slide. I think it's and I'll come on to the reasons for that a bit later. At Sheffield Pool, I think we need to stand cool and strong and simply close it. The last time I heard it reported, it was costing us $18 per swimmer. We'd run a shuttle bus between Sheffield and Darfield cheaper. It's an uneconomic, unsafe facility. It is time to close it. It is time for council to stand tall and make the hard decision that we've been elected to do. It doesn't matter, an election's 2 months away. This is the decision that we need to make. That pool time is up. We have done that decision on other pools. It is time that we resolve to close the Sheffield pool. The comment about a need for Lincoln and Pendleton over Melbourne, I think, is quite frankly nonsense. People from Lincoln can come to the Salon Aquatic Centre, or Horseville, or Pioneer, or a soon-to-be Hornby facility. All within 15 minutes, 20 minutes travel. The people of Melbourne don't have that choice. Population should not be our only criteria. If we were going to use population of our criteria to build things, we wouldn't be building a Leaston community centre. We'd be doing Pendleton first. But no one in this room has suggested that. And I wouldn't support it if they did. Population is not the driver of our provision of facilities alone. Melbourne needs an appropriate year-round aquatic facility. That's why I supported it going in the long-term plan. And I do not support the comments here that suggest that Lincoln and Pendleton have a higher priority based on population. Population is not the only criteria. In my view, access is as much or more important. There is no facility in the winter months in Melbourne. The people of Pendleton and Lincoln have plenty of choice. So I really strongly object to those comments in this report and think that we should continue to plan for an upgraded Melbourne facility within a decade, probably based on a site at the Darfield Rec Centre, where there was already room, there's already car parking that would help build that facility. And that's why I don't support the hydro slide. That's $200,000 of temporary use, unless it's designed such that when a new facility is built, it could be moved to it. I really think that we need to look more regionally than simply based on population. If we use population as a driver alone, then almost every facility would be built in Ralston. And despite accusations from the district, that's not what I support. So I really strongly think that we need to look at a different set of criteria. I would not support as a councillor, and I would not support it as a ratepayer of the Southern District, putting higher priority on provision for Lincoln and Pendleton over Malvern. Finally, the option of funding this is proposed to do it across all three aquatic rating zones. I don't support that either. I think Zone 1 has been really carrying the heavy lifting for our aquatic facilities since it was put in. Sheffield and Malvern, Garfield, wouldn't have had the upgrades they've had if it wasn't for Zone 1 rating. I think these upgrades should be funded across Zone 2 and Zone 3 rating. That's probably a consultation point for next year's annual plan. But it's just dead easy to label the Zone 1 rating to carry this heavy lifting. And this was the only district-wide rate where a small proportion of the district is carrying the heavy lifting for the whole district. And at some point, we have to address that. And as we upgrade facilities, then it needs to be looked at what's equitable and what's fair. The greater population in Zone 1 makes it really easy to say it's a small rate increase because Zone 1 carries it. But I don't think it's becoming increasingly difficult to keep arguing that. And so I flagged that as for the future council, for the incoming council, for something to consider. So I support most of this report and most of the recommendations. I do not support the provision of a nice if hydro slide, as we've found at the Selwyn Aquatic Centre. Some inflatables might provide an alternate attractive use at the weekends, which is mainly what we'll be talking about. And more inflatables that we can rotate around our facilities might be a better purchase than a fixed hydro slide at one pool. So I don't know how you're going to handle the voting, Sam, because if it's put in the parts that is currently in our recommendations, I would vote for Part A and against Part B. But I don't know that we need to decide on Part B today.
James may have an answer for you, and if the hydro slide is relocatable, then you mentioned in your speech that you might support it. So I'll find out from James whether that's the case. Let's back up the conversation.
Yeah, the majority of the hydro slide sits external to any in-ground services, so it can be relocated. So I would say out of that budget, $150,000 of that would be relocatable.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Following on from Mark, really, there's a few things perhaps Mark and I could have talked about before this meeting, but the Sheffield pool, you say there's 1,500 people, for 1,500 visits a year. That doesn't sound too bad for a small community, but I suspect most of that is made up of 105 children that are currently at the Sheffield school and not necessarily from the public. So I personally think that we do need to make a decision on the Sheffield pool, have a proper debate about it. It's not for me to say what my feelings are now, but they seem obvious. Again, I kind of look at Melbourne and the Darfield Community Centre. It's very tired and run down, and that needs to be mixed up with the pool, I would have thought. And I would hope in the future that when we update the community centre, and that must happen, that a pool be considered to go with the community centre. And that's got to be a reality, I think, with the new pipeline, the sewer pipeline going in between Darfield and Kirwee. There will be, I imagine, a significant population increase over the years, which says to me that we really shouldn't be spending any more than we need to on the current outdated pool that's not fit for purpose. So with Mark, I do agree that we should just fix it up so that it's okay until we get our feet on the ground. The new council can maybe put a budget in for a long-term upgrade of the community centre, a proper purpose-built pool, so I don't want to waste money on it. The other thing that I too was wanting to mention, and I don't think it's your issue because you wouldn't be aware of the background, but when we built the Selwyn Aquatic Centre, there was a furore within Selwyn from the outlying towns saying, why would we want to pay at the same rate as a person that lives in Rolleston who can walk to the Rolleston pool, and we're in Melbourne or Ellesmere or Easton, we don't see that we should have to pay the same amount as they do, and that's why the aquatic rate was set. And it would seem to me to be unfair on the Rolleston ratepayers if you built a new pool in Melbourne, but you expected the Rolleston people to pay $3 per one.
So, and I think that we do need to have a debate, and I don't think we should be finalising it here. It needs to be debated further as to what the fair rate is for a significant add-on to the Melbourne pool, because it's not fair just to use that one rate, which was set under different circumstances to what we have here today. So personally, I'm with Mark. I don't think we should be extravagant with what we do with the pool. I think we should be a bit more far-sighted and say, when the population increases in Dartford, which I have no doubt will, we should be looking at a proper facility. In the meantime, just keep it ticking over. Thanks. Yes, well, I hear Bob and I hear the pain of jazzing up what we've got. But the reality tells me, when you look to the future, yes, we do need to have a new facility at Dartfield, but knowing the speed of change and how wheels grind in local government, it will be at least 10 years. So this spend is a good spend to get something up to speed for the elderly and the youth of this community. There's a lot of elderly people in this community that come down and use the Wilson pool on a weekly basis. There are a lot of school children and people in the surrounding areas, as we've heard about Sheffield. I think we are charged to look into the future and the decisions we make. Dartfield will go ahead. We're just putting sewerage on. In my experience of 20 years around this table, you add sewage, you add development. In 10 years' time, there will be a far greater population in Dartfield to support a pool. But in the meantime, the development contributions will be coming in to help pay to build such a pool when we need it in 10 years' time. I support this increase in budget for this upgrade. I would like to move it if it hasn't been moved, and I think we should get on and get it done as soon as possible so the people of Melbourne have got a facility that's adequate for the next 10 years.
You moving, Bob? Yeah. What's in the report? Yeah. Is there a second after that? Oh, thanks. Sophie.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can I just say one thing that would have been really helpful with this report would have been a map of the zones, the swimming pool rating zones, because it does make it a bit harder to look at that particular part of the recommendations without having that map there. But apart from that, I'd say, yes, I support closing the Sheffield pool. In some ways, they're kind of analogous because both of them need a lot of maintenance, but one of them gets used a lot more than the other. So it makes far more sense to upgrade this one, which is almost more like maintenance rather than an upgrade, because it's also old and frankly, in a few years would probably need to close if it doesn't get this refresh, which is quite hard to stomach when it's $2 million for a refresh, but that is literally how much it costs to fix up, you know, the sides, the equipment and everything else. And yeah, I'm sure we'll get an upgraded Dartfield Centre at some point, but I can see Leiston and Prebbleton sitting there going, hey, we're still waiting for our community centres. It'll happen. It will happen. One thing I was just wondering though, I love the look of this toddler splash pad, or the, you know, the wet area and everything, and just wondering, thinking of places like, admittedly in Christchurch, but like Scarborough and New Brighton, they've got similar facilities, but obviously they're out in the open, but they do run most of the year round. And is there anything that, you know, if there was, because there are sunny days outside of summer pool dates, something to think about, whether or not anybody would be willing to make that accessible a bit more often, because that's slightly lower risk, because you know that there's going to be parents supervising. It's a thought anyway, but yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophie. James.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you very much for the report, James. Agree with my fellow councillors, and we do have a decision to make with Sheffield, and that decision is to make it safe. And if making it safe means that the closure is imminent, then the discussions with the community should be held, and supporting them, the children, to get to better facilities fit for purpose. So and I know that discussion is happening, and it needs to continue to happen. The objective is to make it safe and keep our children safe. The cost of upgrading the Dartfield pool, I'm not an expert. I presume that cost is in line with the expectation that in Mark Riker's report for a pool strategy that hopefully will last to when the council that makes the decision at the time of the day will implement a strategy that encompasses a Darfield and a Prebbleton and Leaston. So in that respect, I support the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded as in the report. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Correct, carries. Thanks, James and Sandrine, for coming in today. The next item is plan change 68. Jess Tulipa is not. Oh, there. Oh, Jess, great. Walking away from me, yeah. No, it's open. You can just have to push play. So just note that Councillor Lyles noted and noted the conflict earlier and will be stepping away from the table and take no part in the discussion or decision making of this item. Jess, welcome along, and floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. Just a quick summary. Plan change 68 was formally received by Council in February 2021. The plan change seeks to rezone approximately 67 hectares from rural inner plains to living Z. This is a residential development in the southwestern edge of Prebbleton. The estimated yield of the area subject to the plan change is about 820 residential lots based on the current operative district plan living Z density rules plus roading and servicing layouts as demonstrated in the outline development plan. After being publicly notified in September 2021, there were 38 submissions and 4 further submissions received. A hearing was held in late March 2022. The hearing commissioner, Tony Hughes Johnson, his recommendation was provided to staff on the 23rd of June. Through the course of the plan change hearing process, there are several amendments made to the original application based on the Section 42A report and submitted concerns, including amendments such as to the subdivision rule 12.1.3, which would require the Shands Road, Trents Road intersection roundabout upgrade to be completed prior to residential development occurring on the site. It is recommended that Council accepts the Commissioner's recommendation and approves Plan Change 68. If Council accepts the Commissioner's recommendation and approves Plan Change 68, the statutory RMA process will continue with the decision being publicly advertised and notice being served on all the submitters, and then an 30-day appeal period to the Environment Court would occur. Any questions?
Thanks, Jess. So we're back in the space of holding a process, making sure it's clear and transparent for everyone to be involved in, and following the rules set out in the RMA. We've moved in seconder for this. Move Murray, thank you. Seconded Jeff. During discussion, all those in favour say aye. Against? And 2 abstainers, noted, Deborah and Sophie. Declare it carried. Thank you. The next item is plan change 71, private plan change for rezoning land in Rolleston. And Rachel is here. Thanks, Rachel.
Good afternoon, councillors. Once again, this is a plan change request where we are asking that you make the decision to accept the Commissioner's recommendation in relation to the plan change. PC 71 is on the outskirts of Rolleston, bordered by Levi Road, Lincoln Rolleston Road down as far as Noberlin Drive. It was originally for around 53 hectares, including some land that is currently living Z, but where they were proposing to change the outline development plan to provide for connections through to the new land. The Commissioner recommends that the plan change be approved in part. There is land under the 50 decibel noise contour for the airport that he recommends not be rezoned. Should you decide to accept the Commissioner's recommendation, the normal statutory processes will occur in terms of notifying your decision, calling for appeals, and in the event that no appeals are received, making the plan change operative. If you've got any questions, please.
Thanks, Rachel. Again, another part of the key process for us is remover and seconder for this item. So Shane and Jeff, thank you. And comments, questions, Sophie?
Yeah, this was really quite interesting reading the Commissioner's report on this one, because there are a few things that I'm really glad that they considered, and in other ways it's kind of disappointing how it turned out. But I thought I'd talk about this one just because it is in Rolleston and I live in Rolleston. For instance, there's a section, paragraph 189, it mentions that there's a surplus, basically it talks about housing capacity and how if we were using 15 households per hectare, we would not have a housing capacity problem. But because we're using 12, we do. This is going to keep coming up, and I know I'm a broken record and I'm doing that whole thing of banging my head against a wall even though it's still hurting. But anyway, you know, we're going to find more developers still using this as an excuse to spread on more land. But the one that did concern me, if I can find it again, more than that, was paragraph 215. Excuse me, somebody is ringing me. Where one of the, somebody who is speaking there basically says that yes, there are concerns around private vehicles and greenhouse gas emissions travelling into Christchurch to work and everything else. But because that's the same for the whole of Rolleston, it doesn't matter. It's not special because it's just as bad as the rest. And I'm just thinking back to a presentation we had not that long ago where they were like, there is good practice, there is meeting the requirements, and then there's better than best practice and something that makes a decision that lasts a long time. And this literally just highlights how we are not making decisions that are going to last the test of time. We are building in problems for ourselves. So it's not really a question for anybody. It's just me banging my head against that wall again.
Noted.
Thanks, Sophie. Deborah?
Thanks, Sophie. Just following on from that last issue around climate change, it's been highlighted through several of these private plan change requests and the legislation that climate change is a consideration to consider. Consideration is not to avoid, it's not mandatory. It's a consideration to weigh up and actually consider. So I just want to highlight that with these decisions.
Yep, thanks for highlighting that, Deborah. It's been moved and seconded. No further comments. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Good. 2 abstained again. 3 abstained. That is Councillor Lyle, Hassan and McInnes, and 4 of them, including Reid. Thank you. Declare carried. Thank you, Rachel. The next item on our agenda is request to make operative plan changes 75, 76 and 78, and Jocelyn is here. Jocelyn, welcome.
Good afternoon, Council. This report is in relation to plan changes 75, 76 and 78. You may remember them from much earlier in the year. The decision on the plan changes has come to Council and Council has resolved to approve those plan changes. And they've now gone through their appeal process, but again, an earlier decision of Council was to hold them. Essentially what's occurred between that decision in February and now is some further re-evaluation of the provisions of the Resource Management Act, discussions and ongoing thinking. And it's led us to a position today which is expressed in this report, which is why they are still held now, once we notify the variation as we're required to do under the Enabling Housing Supply legislation. That variation then has a life. It's legs on its own. It follows a process, and we are in we have 2 plan changes occurring: the original that you have approved, and the variation. And the current thinking is that in approving, or in giving life to the variation, it gives us freedom to consider how we deal with the original, with the parent. And so this report is seeking that post the variation, the council grants staff or approves making the plan changes 75, 76 and 78 operative to the Selwyn district plan, the operative district plan. They are beyond challenge. There were no appeals during that lodged in the 30 days. So they are not beyond that challenge. So in making them operative, it would allow the plan changes to the district plan to be changed and the development to occur on those sites. The variation continues to bring in MDRS, and in that respect, that process will have to be resolved by August next year. So yeah, the recommendation is just to seek your approval to make the plan changes operative post release of the variation in the next coming weeks.
Thanks, Jocelyn. There's a mover and seconder for this report. Jeff, thank you, and Shane. And questions or comments, Deborah?
Thank you. I note that you have the date that we are looking at medium density housing with regards to the recommendation, so I'll take some liberty here. There's a lot of interest in medium density housing. There's a lot of confusion out there with regards to households per hectare, the rezoning applications process. And I think the last meeting that we had, we actually discussed our comms. What information are we giving our public? With August the 10th, notification is on the 20th of August. That date has not been changed. That gives less than probably 2 weeks, because we're talking working days, and people who are interested in this medium density have 20 working days in which to actually put in their submission. On behalf of the ratepayers or those interested in medium density, I'd like to understand what is our communication with our local community as to how to participate. What's the time frame? Have the letters gone out that was discussed at the last meeting?
That side of this process that we're going through. Well,
I don't see it that, because we've actually taken a liberty with regards to that the council and B actually requires being as soon as possible after clause 34 variation is notified. It talks about the medium density and we're giving a delegation. When I give that delegation, I want to understand the process that is going to be undertaken to go and talk to and explain to our ratepayers, our residents.
That's fine, but we're talking at a scope that's well beyond MDRS, and so there'll be some specific comms that are going to be required, and I'll get Tim to comment on what the comms are, but here we've got 3 plan changes that we're approving. The comms for this are slightly different than the focus piece around MDRS, which I agree our community is concerned and wants to hear about, but I just don't, the 2 things shouldn't be confused with one another, although they may be together.
Not have access to, with regards to actually bringing the debate to the table and clarifying how we're going to communicate this within a very short time frame to our communities.
So it's less about the work that's been done and more about the public seeing that the work's been done. Good to have that clarity. Tim, do you want to talk about the costs?
Yes, I can. So we are putting together a comprehensive comms package. We should have that ready by the middle of next week. The letters that are going out, I believe there was New Zealand Post, and will be sent out the next day or so. And certainly we'll have some information, including Q&As on our website. I was thinking about some drop-in sessions as well. There was a friend of Submitter, and I just see Kat has walked into the chamber. We'll just give an update on the comms package for the variations. Katrine, would you be able to, and I've talked about the letters going out with New Zealand Post. I've talked about Q&As on our website, and I've talked about drop-in sessions. You may be able to add to that.
Yes, so we are basically contacting directly all the affected parties, and letters have already been sent to the New Zealand Post, so they should be arriving in letterboxes next week. We are also sending emails, so basically all the affected parties should receive communications from us by Friday the 19th. That's the plan. We are going to let people know that we're doing information evening sessions, where planners are going to do a presentation and hopefully address all the sort of key questions. In addition to giving people the sort of face-to-face opportunity, we're also going to make information available on our website, and have key messages, robust FAQs. And obviously we're going to be promoting people being able to contact us and talk to our duty planners, and also promote the phone number submitter service as well.
Thanks, Deborah. Does that answer your concerns?
Yes, it does, but I think you mentioned the date, the 19th of October, people should receive some correspondence. Or 19th of August, that's the date before notification, with 20 working days for people to actually manage to make contact and understand the process, and then be a submitter within that process. Okay, I just hope it's an adequate time frame, with regards to the 20 working days.
Thank you. Sophie.
Yeah, kind of just keeping to the topic of this particular paper, just noting that this adopting MDRS variation for these 3 subdivisions makes no difference to them, because all of them came down to 12 households per hectare anyway. So it's actually no change. It's just allowing them to go ahead. So the only thing I was going to say is I really hope the developers of them take a look at the medium density thing and choose to go a wee bit above that. Yeah, I'll just keep bagging.
Thanks, Sophie. Tim, do you have anything else you want to add?
Oh, no, just there is in part of the meeting some further information on the process, and we have Mr. Rogers here to discuss that as well. So there is an opportunity to talk about that in some more detail if councillors are of a mind.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Any abstainers? Declare one abstainer. Malcolm Lyle. Sorry, give me your abstaining as well. 2 abstainers. Thank you. Still carried. Thank you very much, Jocelyn, for that report. That moves us on to. We've got the notice of motion, do we now?
476 is to me. Register of documents.
Sorry, documents signed and sealed. That the following transactions and affecting the common seal under authorised signatures be approved. It's on page 476. Moved Ifihara, seconded Lyle. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it's carried. Now it's notice of motion. Councillor. Yeah, there we go. So Mike, you're moving to extend the meeting beyond the 2 hour limit, so we finish this before we close for afternoon tea and Phoenix. Is there a seconder for that? Yeah. Thanks, Deborah. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. Mike.
Thank you. I remove this notice of motion, and I am assuming that I have a seconder in the room. It is with much disappointment, embarrassment and regret that I move this notice of motion in my name. If council, elected members and staff had fulfilled the commitment we made when we adopted the 2021-31 long-term plan, this wouldn't be necessary. Unfortunately, it is. This isn't an attack on council staff members, and I hope no one considers that it is. This is my response, and I hope the response of councillors, to a failure in council's systems and processes. In addition, monitoring of council's annual and long-term plan commitments may be something that council's Audit and Risk Committee may wish to add to their work program. I'm going to give a bit of background for those listening or watching who aren't familiar with council budget processes. Every year we consult our community on either an annual plan or a long-term plan. The annual plan is an update to the long-term plan. The long-term plan is a 3-yearly update to council's financial plan, which might be more commonly known as council's budget. The long-term plan is consulted on in the second year of the 3-year election term. Every April, council publishes its draft plan and asks for submissions from the community, submissions on what the community like, dislike, what they want removed or added. Hearings are held, council deliberates on the submissions, modifies the draft, and in June passes resolutions to adopt the plan. Some of these resolutions are instructions to staff so that the decisions of elected members are carried out are implemented. These are not requests, these are instructions. The issue at hand. As part of the 2021-2031 long-term plan consultation, council received submissions from Affinity Gymnastics and Affinity supporters, asking council to consider building a purpose-built gymnastics facility to lease on a commercial basis to Affinity Gymnastics. A May 21 staff report, part of the long-term plan process, had indicated that land adjoining the Solon Aquatic Centre may be a suitable site, and that Affinity would be unlikely to be in a position to pay a commercial rental or lease. Elected members must have considered that there was merit in these submissions because it resolved on June 23, 2021, when it adopted the long-term plan, that council agreed in principle to build a gymnastic facility in Ralston, which would be funded by a lease and subject to a business case. More information on the scope, scale and funding options is to be prepared by December 2021. December 2021. A budget was also allocated $200,000 in the 2021 financial year for the initial feasibility work, planning and design. Elected members understood that this was a clear directive to the Chief Executive to have council staff complete or commission a business case study on this proposal to be reported back to a council meeting by December 2021. This resolution has not been rescinded by council. It still stands as a resolution of council. It is to my great embarrassment and disappointment that this study wasn't undertaken, wasn't reported back to a council meeting, that I as an elected member failed in my duty to ask why this hadn't taken place until Mr. Ryan Jones from Affinity Gymnastics copied me in on an email in July 2022. I personally wish to offer a sincere and genuine apology on my behalf to Mr. Jones, Affinity Gymnastics and Affinity's members and supporters for my failure and the failure of council processes. What should have happened, in my opinion, is that if staff believe that the long-term plan decision was inappropriate, the staff should have reported back to a council meeting before December 2021 and should have had asked elected members to reconsider their decision. Council systems and processes failed when the decision was made to ignore the LTP resolution and not undertake the study. This failure was exacerbated when the staff decision was not reported back to the elected members. There may be genuine reasons for not undertaking the study, but there isn't any reason. There isn't any reason for not reporting this to elected members until a briefing last week. Council staff reported back to Mr. Jones on July 27, and I quote, "Council senior managers did discuss this matter this week, and it was identified that there are other related needs assessment business cases that are also still need to be prepared to inform council considerations and decision making. And meanwhile, other matters have been deemed as warranting greater urgency for action. This situation suggests to council managers that consideration of the investment in a gymnastics facility is still some time away for council to have the information it needs." Council senior managers discussed the matter. Council senior managers did not refer this to the elected members, the governance group, until Mr. Jones emailed elected members. Questions have arisen about the appropriateness of this proposed site and whether a purpose-built single-use facility best fits within council's sport, recreation and play places and spaces strategy. It's impossible to answer these questions and other questions as the strategy is in still draft form, and the business case, which may have addressed these questions, has not been undertaken. If I recall correctly, when elected members debated this issue as part of the long-term plan, we accepted that the return on this investment may be less than a fully commercial return on the basis that there is an element of community good in providing a facility for training gymnasts in our district. In March 22, as part of the preparation for the 22-23 annual plan, staff removed funding for this proposal. So now we have no study and no funding for a study. Indeed, I've been advised by staff that the business case cannot now be undertaken because there is no funding. Fortunately, budgets are not set in stone, as we've seen previously in this meeting. And that was the advice of my accountant. Underspends and overspends do occur. As I mentioned, other reports in today's council agenda show that elected leaders can choose to vary budgets and authorise over-expenditure. If in passing this resolution that I propose, it means that a budget overspend by $200,000 to fulfil this 2021 promises made, then so be it. This is a commitment we as a council made last year. This is a commitment we as council have not fulfilled. Now, councillors, I ask that the council affirms its resolution of June 21 and authorises the completion of this business case as we were promised in June 21 and instructs the Chief Executive Officer to make it happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Deborah. David.
So a couple of things. It is absolutely correct that we did not undertake a business case for this matter. Councillor Alexander's talked about a couple of processes that we need to refer to. He's talked about funding, but equally for me it's resourcing. We simply are not resourced. It's not that we're not funded, we're not resourced. Councillor Alexander also referred to a presentation, to a briefing meeting last week. At that briefing meeting, we advised that we are planning on tabling our sports, recreation and play places and spaces strategy to council in September. That plan identifies gymnastics as one of a number of fast-growing sports in the district. And my advice to council is to wait for that report and consider the options for gymnastics and other sports together with location options as well.
Thanks, David. I think Mikey covered quite a lot of territory there, and I think a lot of it, I agree with around setting up the expectation within our community and then our ability to deliver that to our community. And I think that over the last couple of years, this isn't the only project that we haven't met community expectation, whether it's been because of, as David has said, the resourcing required, both of people and the dollars to do things as costs have changed over the last little while. There have been a number of projects that haven't seen the delivery like we would have liked. David, I appreciate the way in which you've given us a road forward as well, that we ensure that whatever decision we make today is considered in light of the wider scope of work that's going on. I'd be interested to hear from councillors how you'd like us to proceed. Nicole.
Sorry. Second. Once again, I'd just like a timeline for this report, please, with regards to its presentation. And when we talk about including wider sports, I want to try and understand the difference between wider sports being provided for on council land, whereas this was a specific sort of design and build to be leased. It's slightly a little bit different with regards to how we accommodate our different sporting codes. And I'd just like to understand a bit about the responsibility and the timeline to actually report back to us as council. So we've got something to gauge by for the new council coming through.
So the first answer to your question is, as I said, that draft report is proposed to be scheduled in September of this year. the facility, the questions that are being asked is, are we doing a design and build for a specific end user?
Yeah.
Or are we building a facility for a particular sporting activity, which could be used by multiple users? That's the key thing. But
regarding design, build, approach taken, all of that will be investigated through the business case process and will come back in due course. Just a query on the motion, if it is being moved, that was talking about increasing budget. There's no reference to budget in this.
Just to go back to James Richmond's report about the aquatic facilities, and it was mentioned that this location for this may be potentially need to be looking at what we're doing and where it will go. I mean, it's not really, we really need to be looking at strategically where it will need to be the groups, facilities and everything as part of plan. The aquatic centre going forward, and to make sure that that's all part of what is looked at with, I would think that is something that Mark Rikers is looking at these, but I just want that recorded because it was brought up for Alexander about the location being at the aquatic centre. Thank you. And I really don't think that we have that much land left there to be putting other sports or whatever in that location. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Nicole. Murray.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Firstly, thanks, Mark, for bringing this to attention, and you've clearly put a lot of time and thought and effort into it, and commend you for doing that. You're right, we have slipped up, and we should take ownership of that, and you've articulated that really well. We're mindful, of course, we're in 2.5 years into a pandemic, and it's caused all sorts of other issues, and I won't use it as an excuse, but it is a contributing factor. There's no getting away from that. So there's been impacts on staff. I think it's what we do now that is really important. And the Chief Executive has articulated that there's a report coming on all our facilities, and I have great confidence in Mark Rikers to deliver us as he always does, a very comprehensive report. That doesn't get us out of the issue that we've got currently with the one facility that we promised to do some work to, and retrospectively we will deal with that. Mm-hmm. To me, it's the failure of process that Mark has identified as well, which is perhaps more important. And it's about ensuring that the lesson we learn from this is that we keep an eye on what we've promised, and we report that back. And the suggestion about having that is one of the good things of a new independent chair is to have action points from meetings, and it's something that has paid dividends because it's kept front and centre, and we now have those in our reports, full council reports as well. So, Mark, I think the suggestion that you make there about having that, tracking our decisions is a really valid one, and I think there's real merit in it, and that'll be a decision for incoming council to adopt, I guess, as well, rather than those of us, you and I included, who are not much longer around the table. But yeah, just thanks, Mark. I appreciate the effort that you've put in, and sometimes we have to swallow a dead rat.
I haven't done that yet, Murray. I hope I never do. Yes, thank you very much, Sam, and thank you too, Mark. Yes, this is councillors and governors. This is our job, accountability, and clearly, in the eyes of the people that we can make a commitment to, haven't seen that yet. So I do appreciate you bringing this to the table. Clearly, I've heard that there will be a draft business case presented in September. There's a commitment there. Is that correct? Okay. So just clarity around that. We're going back to the process, and thank you very much, Murray. You've offered solutions as well. We've made a commitment. What is the legal requirement under the Act? And also, we've entered into long-term process, and our planning process is a process of integrity and democracy. So it's good to see that we're holding ourselves to account in this respect. And if we have made a mistake and we haven't communicated that well, then we need to own that, because it clearly seems that there's been a lack of communication back to the people that we promised to make a commitment to. Perhaps I'm not too aware of that, but clearly there's some frustration into the process. So we've made a commitment. We need to fulfil our obligations, at least in the first step. So thank you very much, Mark. I support the direction going ahead. But just what was the Kimberley?
It's sports recreation. And
yes, Mark Rice. Yes.
Mark Rice.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. So.
And sorry, so the business case will be presented. Is it? We'll be voting on it.
I need to vote yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Sam. I've just got a little bit of a different look on this myself, and I've heard the word process used, and I've heard the word commitment used. And, you know, in every organisation at some stage, processes fail. And, you know, in many instances since I've been on the council, we have applauded the initiatives that staff have made on their own behalf, on behalf of the Solon community, where we have, I guess, basked in the reflected glory of what they have achieved. Because as councillors, we often come up with ideas, but then we don't really achieve things as such as councillors. But when we look at the Tiara Centre and all the beautiful buildings that we have and what the staff have achieved, I've never actually heard anyone use a notice of emotion, a notice of motion, not emotion, motion, to say, well done to our staff. And this is in the years that I've been here. So I think we as councillors have slipped up there a little bit. I don't think that this notice of emotion has come with any real vindictiveness about it, but it seems to me that it has a sense of public humiliation about it, which I am really not for. And I've been a manager since 1982 of staff, and it is certainly not something that I would do publicly humiliate any staff member that had made a mistake, rightly or wrongly. It's something that we should have, I think, around this table, in the event of this case, we should have dealt with or communicated in a better way. In fact, last meeting we knew that there was a report coming that was from the CEO that would answer the questions that we're posing at the moment. So then following week to put a notice of motion so that the public in general can hear us airing our dirty washing is not how I would like to see things happen again. We have had wonderful service from our staff. We have had, in the last 2 years, a really mixed up year. This was mentioned at the last meeting. Staff have been off ill. We've had budget blowouts. We've had everything that you could possibly throw at something. And here we are, a notice of motion saying we're not happy about something. We could have dealt with this in-house. It didn't need to be dealt like this. I know there's issues, but every organisation has hiccups. You don't then get onto the public line and tell everybody about it. So I won't be voting for it. I'm going to tell you that right now. I don't agree with it. I think it's bad. I think it's really poor form.
Thanks, Jeff. Malcolm.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I feel along the same way that you do. I'm not interested in the vocal gymnastics we've had to put up with in the last 10 minutes. I look forward to the future for a multi-party gymnasium where multiple gym clubs might be able to use it, not singular ones on a piece of land that we provide them. I think that we have slipped up and there's been pandemics, and as Councillor Lemon said, failure of process. Talking about failure of process, I'm still waiting for a community centre for Privilege. Don't give me a notice of motion. So I'm quite happy to see this go forward to the Mark Riker's report for consideration and how we move forward and to where we provide facilities in the long term for our burgeoning population.
So Shane, just to sort of raise a question around clarity, I just want to make sure a vote yes to this is a vote yes to the business case, as Mark has stated pretty clearly. A vote no to this is the continuation of the process with the Mark Riker's report coming the next month.
September.
September.
Yes,
Okay. You're clear on that, Shane. I just want to make sure you knew where. Okay. Any further comments or questions people wanted to raise?
Just really clarification then on our requirements for the decision at the moment. But
Yeah, I guess that's sort of a question that I need to answer. The decision that we made around the table during our long-term plan to commit X amount of dollars to as a business case for this particular group, where does that now stand?
That will still be addressed.
That list was us, Shane, and that's Jeff's comments around how we deal with things where they are and aren't delivered on. Yeah.
Okay.
There's no legislative requirement around that.
Okay.
We're accountable to our community. That's the. Mark,
Thank you, yes. Jeff, this isn't washing our dirty laundry. This is acknowledging to our community and a significant part of our community that we failed. And we should front foot that. We made a commitment to do something and we haven't done it. It's not washing our dirty laundry. It's probably hanging our heads in shame. I'm certainly hanging my head in shame because we made a promise, we as a group made a promise that hasn't been fulfilled. And I take that seriously. And I believe it is appropriate to air this in public. We get accused of hiding things too often. And this is an appropriate way of saying, yeah, we didn't do what we promised and addressing it. Regardless of the outcome of this notice of motion, it acknowledges to the public that we didn't do what we promised. David, I don't believe we don't have resources. We don't have internal resources. There are external resources, and the original budget would have funded that. The questions that you asked, Deborah, wouldn't be answered, I hope, in Nicole, in the business case about the appropriateness of the potential site. There are other sites in Rolleston that would have equally been an opportunity to build this facility. Kelvin, there's no reference to budget. I did actually mention budget, but the instruction of the chief executive is to get it done. And that means find the money or to spend the money. It's not, I'm not concerned about that. And I don't find the comment from behind helpful. Yeah, there's been reasons that it hasn't been done, but I think the biggest failure is the failure to report back that it wasn't going to be done. And what I expect to see on our agenda for our next meeting is a motion to rescind the motion from our long-term plan, which still stands on our books, that a business case would be completed by December 21. If we generally are not going to do that, then we actually need to rescind that resolution. To have resolutions in our book that we willfully choose to ignore is inappropriate. So if we're not going to do it, then perhaps Mr. Riker's draft strategy is presented to us in the council meeting next month. There will also be a clause that rescinds the annual plan resolution and acknowledges that we're not going to do what we promised. And then our community can put their faith in the commitments we make accordingly. It's just, I'm just frustrated. We had a good debate last year. We agreed with the food gymnastics thing that the demand is there. We agreed to do this, and now for a variety of reasons, not going to do it. So be it. So be it. But I think we all should be embarrassed by the lack of progress and the fact we haven't honoured the commitment we made to this group. Thank you.
That's right. They moved and seconded. That is the motion.
Can I just seek clarity, Mr. Mayor? There's an indication there that we need to find funds. Are we doing that within our current budget, or would you like to move that we have the 200,000 that was originally there put back in as unbudgeted expenditure?
Well, as the seconder, there is obviously a budget for Mr. Rikers to work out the needs assessment with regards to all of our community facilities of where we're going to locate. And I am questioning why can't this include the options for business cases in specific areas. So we have a comprehensive report brought to us at council in September to look at the options.
It's not the budget. So this is a two-part process, let's be clear. The first thing we've got to do is vote on Councillor Mark's notice of motion. If that succeeds, the second thing we have to discuss, or the second request that you're going to pass, is to ask me to try and find some money, because we can't proceed without the money. So let's not discuss that at this stage, but just foreshadow that if this succeeds, that will then be a request that we'll have to discuss immediately after.
Okay, all that.
And if the motion fails, Mr. C, what's the status quo?
Status quo is that we come back to the Rikers report in September, which I referred to in my opening remarks.
One more question.
No, we're only going to write a reply, and I just think the process through here should just be we vote on the matter now and follow. If it passes, there's the future question that David has asked. So all those in favour of Councillor Alexander's notice of motion, say aye. Aye. Anyone against, say no. No. Declare it lost. Mark, thank you for raising it for us. The next item is the moving to PX. Do I have a mover and seconder? Lemon and Reid, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. And we'll break now. It's 3:20. We'll take 20 minutes and join again at 3:40. Thank you.